Alright guys, so welcome to the next video. This is where we're going to import the asset actually into the game. So a lot of the stuff that we set up in the previous video as far as BepInEx and getting our publicized assemblies inside of Valheim data managed, this is going to help us at this stage. These are all going to be referenced automatically when you download the mod template if you set it up the exact same way that I do. So we can actually close all this out. Make sure you have these pinned in quick access if you need to reference them again. But we don't need our Unity anymore. We actually don't need pretty much anything. We can close out of everything. We don't need our assembly publicizer. We reference that. We don't need BepInEx, so we can close all this out. All we need is our Unity project asset bundle, standalone windows, and our actual asset bundle here. So what we want to start doing is bringing this into the game. We are going to open, in my case, Rider. You can open up Visual Studio if you want. Personally, Rider is a much better program. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to open up a browser window. We're going to go to github.com. If you don't have an account, I recommend creating one. What we are going to grab is something that we've created in a previous mod tutorial, which is the Item Manager mod template. I created this. It's under Azimat Dev Item Manager mod template. So we can go here, and you have the Skill Manager and the Creature Manager as well. Piece Manager coming soon. So this is going to set up everything for us. This has server sync inside of it. This has a version handshaking, which if you don't want your mod or don't care if your mod version handshakes with the server, you can delete this C# file and it'll just go away. You won't need it. So what this does is references the item manager in a C# format or a file format. You also come with, in the libs folder, you come with the DLL. This will always be up to date as best as I can currently maintain it. It comes with a license with MIT, so feel free to change this however you want. Keep in mind, if GitHub does not have a license on the right-hand side, that repo is read-only. You are technically breaking the author and a few rules in general, and possibly even some laws depending on what you're copying, if you are downloading and changing something that doesn't have a license. That is protected by default GitHub. So what we need here is we're actually going to click on the green button that says code. We're going to grab the HTTPS code for this repo. And back in Rider, in the top right, we have get from VCS. You're going to have a version control thing in Visual Studio. But we're going to say get from VCS, and in the URL, we're going to paste. Make sure this version control is set to get. In the directory, we don't want this to be called the Item Manager mod template. We're going to call this test sword tutorial. So we're going to clone this. So it's getting it from this URL, but we're going to have it save in Rider Project's test sword tutorial for us. So we're going to hit clone here. Say trust and open. I promise that there's nothing bad in here. So because we set up all of our assemblies ahead of time, we did everything in our default Valheim install. These are automatically going to reference your assemblies for you. So if you notice, we're referencing Zero Harmony, BepInEx, Assembly Valheim, Assembly Utils, and GUI Utils. Also the asset bundle, so we can bring in our asset bundle, core module, IMGUI module, and UI. If for some reason these break, these are in your default install, and I'm going to quickly show you where these are. So for the Zero Harmony and the BepInEx, you're going to find this in BepInEx core, Zero Harmony DLL, and BepInEx DLL. You would right click on dependencies, and you would say reference these. Okay? Now, go back to Valheim, under unstripped core lib where we installed BepInEx. Unstripped core lib is where you want to grab any of your Unity Engine DLLs. So you're going to want to grab Unity Engine and Unity Engine Core. So usually these are pretty close together. This will also be where you grab your asset bundles and all that. So asset bundle, core, IMGUI, and UI. So I grabbed UI for the version control. If you don't have that, you technically don't need this reference. For additional stuff, so Unity Engine DLL and Unity Engine Core DLL is right here, and right above that is going to be the asset bundle module. If you notice, I filtered in a different way to get those close together like that. But either way, if you reference them, that's fine. So server sync is coming from our libs folder. You're going to reference that here. I chose not to include it, the item manager, as a DLL. I chose it as C#. If you want to reference it as a DLL, make sure you reference it in dependencies, but you also need to delete this item manager CS or exclude it from your compilation. So IO repack.targets is also a file that you would need to edit if you choose the DLL version. You would need to uncomment, which is these 2 dashes in this, and these 2 dashes and the greater than symbol in here. This will bundle it up inside of your code and get everything ready for you. So, for sake of argument, we're going to go with the C# version or the C# file. We need to change this away from item manager mod template into something that matters to us. Obviously, the author is not going to be you, and you don't want the mod to be named this. So the first thing that we need to do, and a few things that I've set up for you, is click on the C# project, not the solution, like I just did. Click on properties, and make sure that you are on C# 9 or later. Nullable references are enabled, and under configurations, on debug, you have the allow unsafe code. I mentioned this before, but this is our assembly publicized DLLs, needs this checked, otherwise your mod will not compile correctly. You need that for debug and release. Just make sure allow unsafe code is checked. So we're going to click OK, and we're going to go ahead and start setting up the project to reference something that matters to us. So we're going to go to properties one more time on the C# project. And if you notice, the assembly name is item manager mod template, root namespace is item manager mod template. If you change this here, make sure to change it in the root namespace as well, but we want to reference something that means something to us. So we're going to say sword tutorial. I forgot what it's called, but I'm just going to call it sword tutorial. And I'm going to highlight copy, highlight paste. So sword tutorial for both of these, and click OK. This will reference a few things for us once we compile the project. You're not going to see it immediately in the item manager mod template. But for the namespace, I am going to paste sword tutorial here. And for version handshake, this will error out. Also paste sword tutorial here so all the references get fixed. So mod template plugin, I'm actually going to change this again to something that matters to us. So we're going to say sword tutorial, right? Plugin. So the reason I put that plugin on the additional side is so we know that this is the main plugin class, and also it's different from our namespace. So I'm going to copy that, and that is going to break in a few places. So this is going to break in our properties folder and assembly info, and it's going to break in our version handshake. So the quick way is to highlight this, and in Writer you can hit Control R to replace everything, and Control V to paste. So we're going to say replace all here, and we're good in this particular C# file. Assembly info, same thing. Instead of using item mod manager template, we're going to say using sword tutorial in my case. But this is using your main class. That's what that means. So whatever your namespace and your main class name is for your main class, you want that right here. So we're going to hit Control R here as well, and it's already filled in for us, so we're going to say replace all. So this is done. This will pull from our mod name, our author, and our mod version when we compile this. So if we hover above the DLL after compilation, we'll have all those details displayed to us. So this helps when people install your mod and they want to know what version is actually installed. Windows will recognize it. So item manager mod template here as well. We're going to replace item manager mod template with just sword tutorial. I'm going to delete and say sword tutorial for all of this. So I'm going to hit replace all. We're going to have an error in handshake here, and that's because this logger is what we're going to replace as well. So item manager mod template, click Control R. We're going to replace it with sword tutorial. So our job's done here, except for I actually messed up in this tutorial, and I'll fix it. But PvP always on, we want to change this. As you can tell, that's where I copied it from one of my other projects. So we can change this to sword tutorial if we want, and then just say replace all. And we're good to go on that. So this will actually use your version, your mod name _ version check. It sets everything for you. So this tutorial is pretty much just to copy and replace all and get everything done. So now we're ready to bring this into the game. We want everything to be set up for us. We need to change what we set in Unity. So if you forget, you can go back in Unity and look, which I might actually have to do because I don't remember what I named my prefab. But in my file explorer off to the side, we have this asset bundle. On your C# project, click right click, click add, and you can choose existing item if you've already created the folder. If you haven't, I'm going to choose new directory, and I'm going to say assets. I'm calling it assets because this is a default folder for what item manager actually recognizes, and you can see that by hovering above new, where it says in that last thing, it says string folder name equals assets. That is the default value. You can click comma here and then say a different folder, so it'd be like my cool folder. And if that's the name of your folder, that's where it's going to look for your asset bundle. I'm going to leave mine as default. And I'm going to take my asset, my test sword tutorial, and I'm actually going to right click on the thing, say show in Explorer, and we're going to have this pop up, paste it in here. So we have sword tutorial here. This is a copy paste of the asset bundle, so we're actually not moving it here, but we're just pasting it here. So I'm going to say, yes, sure, this can be added to Git if you're using version control. You can click the star and include it, or you can hit right click, add existing item, and choose sword tutorial here on the folder. Now we need to change the properties of this to be an embedded resource, and click OK. So the asset bundle name, if we hover above the new here, asset bundle file name, then prefab name, then folder name. Okay. So as I mentioned, it would be a comma here. We're going to delete that. And we're going to say that this is the prefab name. This is the asset bundle name. So this is test sword tutorial. That's the asset bundle name. We're getting that from right over here. Now we need to get the prefab name. I will skip ahead because I need to actually check Unity and figure out what I called it. So give me a moment. All right, so looks like I called it test sword tutorial in camel case format. So now we want to say what we actually want this to be called in game. It says you can use this to fix the display name in code. So if you don't want it to be called test sword tutorial and you want to change what the name is, in this case, this will be localizing it, what I mentioned with the $ item or $ whatever for your sword. We're going to say that we want this to be localized to our cool sword, right? And the description is super cool sword made by Azumat, right? So just something stupid simple. If you want to change the author, which most likely you will, just change it here. I'm going to leave mine as Azumat because that's me. And now you can go into Iron Fang Axe. This is just because this is the template. This comes from the item manager template. We in Writer can actually middle click, hold, and right and go down and then say that this is sword. I'm going to call it sword tut. And then I'm going to copy that field and paste here. And the same thing for these three. Paste. Same thing here. Paste, paste. So as we go through, we can choose to label this as a German translation, description for German as well. You can choose pretty much any other language. It does extend from the name portion here. Description. Crafting is if you have a custom crafting station. We do not. We're going to remove that. Now, required items is iron, wolf fangs, and silver. You can change the amounts, whatever you want to. Required upgrade items. This is what they must have to upgrade this particular item. So, if you need and you want this to be craftable at a forge, let's say, we would say crafting station. So that thing that we added here, this is crafting.add, my amazing crafting station. We don't have to do that. That's only if it's a custom crafting station. But if we go to Blackson, which is the person who created the item manager, so we're going to github.com Blackson-boop. We're going to jump to her item manager, and we'll see how if we want to be adding it to the forge. So we'll scroll down, and we see that these are wolf fangs. This is the hero set. We don't need to add anything as far as, crafting.add, crafting table.workbench, right? So we want the workbench here, workbench here. This is if it's a custom asset, custom crafting station. We actually want to add this to the workbench, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to say crafting table, and as you can see, IntelliSense is picking this up for us. So we can say custom, we can say cauldron, workbench, whatever we want. We're going to add it to the workbench, and we're going to say, yeah, sure, keep iron, wolf fang, silver, whatever. We're going to spawn it, so it doesn't really matter to us, but that's how you would change your required items for crafting. This would be your upgrades. This would be required upgrade items. You can add as many as you want. I think it's like 3 or 4 max. And crafting amount, so how much you want to craft all at once when they craft the item at one time. So you can say 1 here if you don't. She created this template as a dual wield template. So anytime that you craft a sword, you get 2 of them. So additionally, if you have any sound effects that you want to bring into the game that are custom, you would create these by using the prefab manager, registered prefab, whatever your asset bundle name is, and whatever the visual effect or sound effect is, and you'd import that. We actually don't need these, and it will potentially cause errors if it can't find anything, so we're going to delete this. So this template comes set up with a watcher, a file watcher. So that means if they add this to their server, not only if you add configurations does it sync those configurations, but also if they're not using the configuration manager to change these and they're editing the file on the server and they want live updates, this watcher will actually read the config file over again and synchronize between clients. So if you've downloaded the project, you have a drop down here that says config options. This is a region. This has everything that's set up for configs. If you want a new entry, you would say new config entry, a Boolean value, which is true or false, integers, longs, anything that you want to synchronize here pretty much. Create your own variable name. And then as you can see, when I clicked on this variable, up here, we have a server config lock config. The first parameter is the section. The second parameter is the variable name. The third is the default value for that variable. And then the description. So when we compile this and get this ready to bring into the game, this will have this particular thing in the configuration for us. So we're ready. We have our asset bundle. We have our prefabs referenced. We changed our mod name. We've changed our mod version. If you wanted to change it and start out at 2.0, that's for your own discretion. But this allows quick and easy updates to our mod. Super simple. The item manager makes this nice and easy for us. So item manager is pretty complex code, but if the game was to break, the reason why I chose the C# format and not the DLL format, it means that I can change anything that breaks right away. I'm not dependent on a library. I'm dependent on my own code at this point. So I'm not dependent on the DLL either, should I choose. But hopefully that author will update the item manager for us, and then you can bring it in as a DLL as that particular portion. But I don't like to rely on anyone else. I like to rely on myself to fix any issues and maybe ask for other people for help. But I don't like to rely on them and their time frame in order to update my stuff. So if I can fix the issue, I can fix it. If not, I'll have to reach out to Blackson to be able to update the item manager. But in C# format, it does give us more control over that particular portion. So now we want to build this project. My shortcut is Control F9, but the quick way to do it is build up at the top and build solution. So everything should be referenced for us. We shouldn't have any issues building this. Mine says build succeeded at 3:05 a.m. We're good to go. So now on the C# project, you can right click, say show in Explorer, and we built this in debug mode, which usually is found at the top. I think for Visual Studio it's somewhere in the middle, but it's still at the top. So we're going to go to the bin folder. We're going to go to debug. Okay, and then we're going to see Sword Tutorial DLL. What allows it to pop out as Sword Tutorial DLL and not Item Manager is we change the application name. And that little tooltip that pops up with Sword Tutorial Company Azimat file version, that's coming from what we changed in the properties folder and referencing everything correctly for us. So we have this DLL. We can copy this. And I recommend using R2 ModMan because you can create many different profiles with many different mods. I already have one set up, but I'll quickly show you how to set one up. So we're going to say create new, and we say test sword. If I can spell today. So hit create, select profile. All mods that you download for Valheim are most likely going to need BepInEx Valheim, whether you get them from Nexus or Thunderstore. R2 Modman is Thunderstore. You can find that at valheim.thunderstore.io. It is Thunderstore. Personally, I think the Mod Manager does a much better job than Vortex Manager at installing mods, but we need BepInEx in order for our mods to run. It's basically the mod loader. So we're going to say download with dependencies, which there isn't any, so we're only going to have one install. But in order to spawn some things, there's a mod out here called Easy Spawner. We're going to grab that. Okay. You can grab as many mods as you need and as many mods as you want. I already have a profile set up with kind of the mods that I like. So I'm going to go to settings and change profile, and then go back to my skill capper testing one, which has 17 mods installed. I have Easy Spawner, BepInEx Pack, Valheim Tooler for some cheats, and a few other things that are just cool to test and play around with. I also have some local mods installed and loaded in here. So in installing local mods, it's just a matter of saying settings, import local mod. So if you get it from Nexus, you can click here and say select the file. So it'll be a zip or a DLL. It'll import it for you. It'll be nice and easy. Or you can scroll up like I do, browse profile folder, go to BepInEx, plugins, and I have a lot more in here that I just drag and drop into this folder. So for instance, my admin, I have these mods here, Peace X-Ray, and a few others. So plugins, I also have a few here as well, Cultivated Ground, and a few other testing items that aren't actually listed. But if you import it as a local mod, it will be listed in your installs here. So we want to test our mod that we just created. We know what the sword looks like in Unity. We want to see it in game. So I'm going to go and copy and paste this in here. You can also import it as a local mod, but I'm not going to, at least for this case. So sword tutorial.dll, we have it. We're going to close this. We're going to say start modded. Good thing about R2 is it doesn't mess with your vanilla Valheim install, so you can actually just click start vanilla here. If you used Vortex, sometimes it installs things in that folder, including plugins, and you might need to double check that just in case, so you're not loading mods that you're not expecting. So this BepInEx window pops up by default, and that will tell us any errors like this one, any errors like this one that load or happen. So I left some of these in here for good examples for this particular video. So we have Sword Tutorial 1.0. It looks like it loaded. There was no errors immediately following it. So we're good to go. We're ready to roll with this particular DLL. So if you happen to click inside your console window, it'll freeze your game, and I happen to do that. So I'm going to hit enter here and load. As you can see, we're stopping on this mod. It's going to take a little while for that one to load. So I'm going to skip ahead in the video once we get to the main menu. Alright guys, so we're at the main menu now. I'm going to choose just any character, go into a single player world so we can quickly demonstrate how this works. The big thing is that we're going to be looking for is, can we craft it? Can it work? Is it in the game? Easy Spawner is going to allow us to see that pretty quick without having to go to a crafting station or spawn a crafting station or do anything like that really. It's going to allow us to scan every single prefab that is in the game pretty quickly. So I'll show you that here in a second. Funny enough, that's playing music. We are going to go out here. We're going to say Easy Spawner and open it up. You do have to hit escape to actually get to this GUI, but you can type it in. We called it tutorial. So our cool sword, as you can see, it localized it for us, and it says test sword tutorial is a prefab name. We're going to tell it to put that directly in our inventory, and look at that. We have a sword in game with fire. We actually have deep fire. It looks kind of cool personally, but just like that, we have a sword in game. We can do whatever we want. You can go and swing the sword. It works just like normal. Uses stamina, uses everything. And just a good test is to drop that on the ground and see if it displays on the ground just fine. It says our cool sword. Pick it up, and right here it is in our hands. So any custom visual effects that you want to create in Unity, look up some Unity tutorials, bring it into the game, whatever you want. I have done this in the past with lightsabers. Lightsabers is a good example of what it looks like of bringing in a custom asset into the game, modifying it, as well as just any other things that you need. So lightsabers, you can override whatever you want. It's vanilla Valheim scripts. So play around with it. Have fun. Worst case, you break your project and have to start over, but we did create a backup in our previous video once we created all of our assembly definitions and everything. So if you break the project or if you break Valheim, it's only going to break with your mod loaded. So just unload your mod or fix your project and you're good to go. Okay? So this video is out. Yes, what's the question? Sorry.
So what are the most common types of errors you get in game? Like if you forgot to check a box, or if you are getting an item that's, I don't know, doesn't work in the game. Like, I mean, you cloned an item basically and kind of made it your own and maybe adjusted a few settings, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what are like the basic things for, like, say you did a new item, like you did lightsabers, what are the common mistakes that you kind of run into here, and how do you debug them?
So most of the common mistakes is not knowing really how Valheim itself works in some cases. So just to give an example, I'm going to go into debug mode. I actually have a mod that will quickly allow me to do that. We'll turn on God mode and turn some things on. So the way Valheim works is the area that you're in is actually considered to be a loaded chunk, right? Everything that you're seeing has a component on it called a ZNet view. If it is an object that moves, let's say an enemy or a player or a projectile, for instance, it has a script attached to it called a ZSync transform. If you need those to be persistent, you want them to be persistent in the world, or you want them to be distant, so on and so forth, you need to make sure that you check those. Without a ZNet view script, it will disappear. You might be able to spawn it, but when you leave the chunk, and I'll show you what chunk means here in a second, or loaded area means in a second, but if you leave the chunk and you come back, it will delete. Valheim will delete it. It's not Unity causing it. It's not anything like that. It's the way Valheim's ZNet View script works and how they have things set up.
Was that the one that Zarbos was like forgetting or whatever? It was like something where it was on destroy, or is that something different?
It's slightly different, but
okay.
Yes. You'll get a lot of errors if your script in general has a ZNet View on it, but it's not parented correctly, and you unload the chunk and it can't. You'll get a ZNet remove objects error. These are all vanilla errors that happen if they mess up anything, but so far vanilla hasn't actually messed that up. It's mostly modders that do. So if we fly directly straight up, we can see that we have a little bit of a loaded chunk, right? We can't see off in the distance quite as well as we would like, and that's because Valheim loads a specific set of items, a specific set inside the chunk that you're in. So you can kind of synchronize things ahead of time before you actually run there, before you go there. So to show you what I mean by chunk and show you what I mean by ZNet view is if we start backing up, you'll notice that the level of detail or the LOD is going to start unloading certain items for us. So we're going to fly away, and this big bubble is a good reference. We can fly away and we see that chunk disappearing, that chunk disappearing. We go over here, we fly a little bit further, we see more of the chunk disappearing and that bubble disappeared. So what that's doing is calling ZNet view destroy. And if we were to fly back in, if that bubble didn't have the ZNet view script on it, it would disappear. It would go away completely. If that house that Crumpack made, which is down here, if that didn't have a ZNet view script on it, it would also be destroyed. So things that we have set up depend on that script. If you were to bring in an item, a lot of people, if it's a brand new item, forget to add colliders. So the reason why you need colliders is if you throw it on the ground, you want it to collide with that ground. You don't want it to go through the ground, right? You need to make sure that if it's an item, you're looking at a vanilla item and seeing how that works. You know, a sword, a weapon, or whatever. Those have specific scripts attached to them. The easiest way is if you're bringing in something that's similar to a vanilla asset, I recommend duplicating the vanilla asset, swapping out your mesh, and then modifying it. That is because it will set up most of those scripts for you, at least by default, and you should be good to go. For the most part.
Azu.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I have a big question.
Yes.
So you're explaining right now the ZNet scene and the LODs, right?
Yes.
So have a look on my screen. Can you explain me this one? I will show you also my. Wait.
And I'll pull this in so everybody in the video can see as well.
Wait. I will have to change to the screen. Change window. Screens 1. Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's up?
So, here in the Unity project, this is my boss hall, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can see. Jesus, right. So, and when I enter this area, everything is fine. Everything is working. I mean, but I'm going here and bam, bam,
Hmm. I can't
bam.
say honestly that I've seen that issue. The only thing that I can think of is there might be some kind of collider attached to that door or something there that you're not able to see. Maybe your environment goes away. Um, I'm not sure. I don't know how you have this set up, but typically when that happens, that means that you're passing through something, maybe a plane or a layer that was maybe attached to this asset. If you got it somewhere like the asset store, that there's a plane there that's actually meant to take you to a new place, or it's the end of the prefab.
Okay, the wolf prefab is like this.
That looks cool.
Uh,
So what I would recommend looking at is figuring out exactly where that door is, like flying around in your Unity area, your Unity scene. Figure out where that door is. See if there's not any plane or anything there that would cause that to happen. Yep. So if there is something there that is colliding with the player that's causing that to disappear.
Yeah, this point.
Yep. Or the asset's too big and the ZNet scene is unloading it. To make sure that the original prefab, the collider actually is that big. Maybe because the asset is so big, it is unloading that particular chunk. That
Okay,
could
they are
be a
like,
possibility.
mm,
So it might not necessarily be the LOD. What you can do is increase the LOD on it to make it completely max, and then say that it's a persistent and distant object on the ZNet view. So the big parent
okay.
object.
I can see. Wait.
Yep.
I
So
can
it
see
is
here.
being culled at a certain distance. That's what the LOD groups do. So as it says, as you're going and clicking through, it's changing the LOD for each thing, which is a good sign. That means it's optimized. But if you need it to be a distant object and you actually want it to be persistent, on the parent object, for Valheim at least, there is a ZNet view script that you can check persistent and distant. That means it'll stay in the loaded chunk for as long as it possibly can. So with your big prefab, that might be something that you're coming across where the game itself will unload that object because it is so big. Similar to how it was unloading the trees and the specific chunks of the map. That might be what it's doing
Yeah,
to your asset at the
he
moment.
is right now 0%. I mean,
Yep.
no, it should be fine. I mean,
Yeah, but keep in mind your asset is huge. So it could be that your asset is so big it counts as a loaded chunk. So when you walk out of a certain area, it unloads that chunk and effectively unloads that asset. So it's a good thing that you're flying. So maybe try and split this up if you know anything about Blender, split it up into different chunks and then link them together. Or go into the ZNet view on the parent script, make sure it is added to bring it into the game and set persistent and distant. And hopefully turn on the LOD to make it to where the whole prefab itself has a bigger LOD and doesn't get cold immediately.
I mean, have a look. The lot is. I mean, this is one person.
Try doing it without flying. Just because it's like enabling clipping, I guess where's your...
Yeah.
Because you're in the sky, right?
Yeah.
So does a player's graphic settings affect that, or is that just 100%, it's just going to be the way it is?
Players' graphic settings do affect that. They can change the load bias, especially if they're in single player. There's a command to actually change the load bias. So it looks like to me, because if you're looking at what looks like your mod where it says location is Woodhouse 1, your location is getting unloaded. So I still think it's because the prefab is so big that the game is unloading it. It might not have anything to do with
Yeah, I don't know.
what you're on right now.
I think Matt's right though. Yeah.
So, what is the big prefab, the parent object on this, the parent game object, not the tiny ones that you're clicking?
This is the boss room.
Okay. So not the boss room itself, but the whole game object, the prefab, the castle, everything. Go all the way to the top. It should have a ZNet view script attached to it, right?
Holy crap.
Yep. So piece, you have it as a piece. Scroll down, you're going to see like ZNet view and a few other things. So on your ZNet view, check distant. So, and you don't need any of the others. It is a type of solid. So distant means it's going to stay in the ZNet view for as long as it possibly can before it unloads.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I was talking about of ZNet view, persistent and distant.
Wow, okay.
So persistent means it stays. Distant means it stays at a big distance. So that should help you out, and it should hopefully fix that issue. If it does not, look in your LOD group for the big object itself, because it looks like it culls at 15%.
Yeah.
So you might need to increase the LOD.
Oh.
It's gonna sound bad, but you might need to increase that.
Oh.
Yep. Say that it stays loaded. Yeah. I'd put it maybe about 3%. That's typically where Valheim puts their stuff is, the cull starts at 3%, or the cull percentage is 3%.
Yeah.
So that might help out. I would test that and take a look. If you have any more issues, let me know. But I am going to stop the video here. That is kind of where you can go and kind of test things out, unless anyone else has.
You're still recording, man.
Yes, I'm still recording because I wanted to answer your question all the way to the end.
Oh, right.
Is there any other questions before I end the video?
No, man.
Nope. All right. So hopefully that fixes your issue, but that's kind of an easy way to troubleshoot. And the same thing for stuff in game. That's kind of how it works. Most of the default stuff that people are going to mess up comes with not applying the proper scripts and not applying the proper colliders to items. So make sure that the colliders are set. It does help when bringing in an item that you try and mimic something that has been created in the vanilla game, and watching some Unity tutorials on how colliders and stuff work, because it does use basically Unity stuff, and surprisingly Valheim uses some things from the asset store as well. So just kind of see how those are set up.
Write down what you said, because your suggestion that you made, maybe you already forgot it, was that you should find a item in the game that is doing something similar to what you want, and then just replace the mesh on that item.
Duplicate it and swap out the mesh.
Duplicate it, then swap out the mesh, which is exactly what like Badger's been doing with a lot of these build item pieces. Is his whole philosophy is just swap out the mesh, and then it'll be a lot easier to deal with than having to import a brand new item and adjusting all of the settings on it.
It is always easier to duplicate something that exists and modify than it is to create from scratch.
I know. I was gonna ask Crumpag, what are you doing? Are you importing all their shit?
Anyway, I'm going to end the video here and get ready to upload that. So hopefully that allows everybody to get some kind of item in the game, and when Piece Manager and Creature Manager and all the other stuff gets set up, maybe we can do some more tutorials on those.